In Brazil, the Superior Electoral Court has declared Bolsonaro guilty and banned him from running for office for years. A report by UNICEF Executive Director Catherine Russell on her recent visit to Haiti shows the vulnerability of the people and children in particular. In France, authorities will deploy 18 armored cars to deal with violent demonstrations that are shaking the country for the third consecutive day. Hello, welcome to From the South. I'm Ana Marrero from the teleSUR headquarters in Caracas, Venezuela. We'll be with the news. Stay with us. In Brazil, the Superior Electoral Court has declared guilty Bolsonaro and banned him from running for office for 8 years. Yet Bolsonaro is ineligible for the next 8 years. 5 of the 7 judges who participate in the verdict ruled that a former president incurred in abuse of power and improper use of the media in a meeting with ambassadors prior to the elections of 2022. With a ruling, Bolsonaro will not be able to participate in the municipal elections of 2024 nor in the state and national elections of 2026. The 66th edition of the Sao Paulo Forum is taking place in the Federal District of Brasilia, with Latin American and Caribbean integrations as a main point of its agenda. Our teams tell us about it.
After 3 years of interruption caused by COVID-19 pandemic, the Sao Paulo Forum met again. 270 representatives of leftist parties and social organizations from Latin America, the Caribbean, and the world brought to Brasilia their diversity and a common horizon to build the integration of the region, to protect its nature, peoples, and sovereignty.
Is an organization that exists since 1990, which has composed of the parties of the left and center-left of Latin America and other parties that also participate. Its proposal is to discuss the democratic and popular participation of the left in the electoral and democratic processes of the countries, to unite around banners such as the fight against inequality and hunger and sustainable development.
The meeting returns to Brazil with the down wind as the Workers' Party returns to power. On the opening day, Marco Aurelio Garcia, founder of the forum created in 1990 at the initiative of Lula da Silva and Comandante Fidel Castro, was honored.
When we speak of the economic and political integration of Latin America, we speak above all of conscience, of a conscience that has to be formed, of a thought that has to be created. I humbly believe it is the duty of the left, said Fidel, to create consciousness of the integration of Latin America. No region in the world has as many things as we do. End of quote.
The presence of President Lula served as a weapon to counter the demonization of the forum by the media controlled by the global right.
It would be better off if they call us Nazis, neo-fascists, terrorists, but never communists or socialists. That does not offend us. That makes us proud.
The new wave of progressive governments in the region is considered an opportunity, but also a challenge in which it is no longer enough to win an election. For the road map of social struggles, the forum proposed to look forward with small steps.
I believe that the horizon is marked by the unity of our peoples, of our countries. For this, I say that practical steps must be taken, materially, to fight against the blockade imposed against Cuba, Venezuela, with the wrongly named sanctions, coercive measures against Nicaragua. But I believe that one of the essential tasks is to dismantle the Organization of American States.
The Sao Paulo Forum extends until Sunday, July 2nd, where a resolution of the left will be presented for the urgencies in the region.
Ignacio Lemos y Julia Nasif para teleSUR.
A report by UNICEF Executive Director Catherine Rosol on her recent visit to Haiti shows that the fragile and vulnerability with which people and children in particular have to deal with. She called for much more support for the most vulnerable children and families facing rapid violence, deadly natural disasters, and the resurgence of cholera. Unprecedented hunger and malnutrition, extreme poverty, the crumbling economy, the resurgence of cholera, and massive insecurity are creating a deadly spiral of violence. A total of 5.2 million people are in urgent need of humanitarian assistance, including nearly 3 million children. Some 4.9 million people are struggling to feed themselves, and more than 115,000 children under the age of 5 are expected to suffer from life-threatening malnutrition this year, a 30% increase on last year.
And our team there tell me it's never been worse than it is now. Unprecedented hunger and malnutrition, grinding poverty, a crippled economy, resurgence of cholera, and a massive insecurity that creates a deadly downward spiral of violence. While, of course, flooding and earthquakes continue to remind us all just how vulnerable Haiti is to climate change and natural disasters. I was told this is a part of a new strategy by the armed groups. They rape girls and women and they burn their homes to make them more vulnerable and more easily controlled. Because if they break the women, they've broken the foundation of the communities.
In Colombia, Foreign Minister Álvaro Leiva Durán, together with his Venezuelan counterpart Ivan Gil, inaugurated the Commission of Neighborhood and Binational Integration. With this mechanism, the body at the political level aims to promote and coordinate cooperation and integration between the two countries with a focus on the border areas. This is part of the agenda for the consolidation of bilateral relations between the governments of President Nicolás Maduro and President Gustavo Petro. The government of Argentina requests the declaration of unconstitutionality of the reform promoted by the governor of the province of Jujuy, Gerardo Morales. The Minister of Justice and Human Rights, Martín Soria, by means of a written statement delivered on Friday, raises the institutional gravity generated by the partial reform of the Constitution of Jujuy promoted by Governor Morales, given that in Article 94 and 95 of the reform project, there is an omission of the due consultation of the indigenous people who are interested in several issues that directly affect them. Let's take a very first break now, but remember, you can now follow us on our TikTok account as teleSUR English, in which you will be able to see news in different formats, news updates, and more. Stay tuned for more news. Welcome back to From the South. In France, authorities will deploy 18 armored cars to deal with violent demonstrations that are shaking the country for a third consecutive day. The French authorities will deploy on Friday night several armored vehicles to deal with the riots that are shaking the country following the death of a minor at the hands of a policeman. According to the authority, 14 Berlin VXB 170 cars and 4 dozen Taurus will be used by the Gerard Mines. This is the first time that a Centaurus, a new vehicle acquired by the police force, will be used. The decision was taken by Premier Elizabeth Borne on the recommendation of the Minister of Interior, Gerald Darmanin, with the aim of strengthening the presence and intervention capacity of the police force.
The French government said on Friday that it is studying all options to restore order in the country after a new night of riots that left more than 800 people arrested and nearly 250 security personnel injured. Protests have included riots, arson, and clashes with police forces in rejection of what is perceived as a culture of impunity and a failure to reform law enforcement. On June the 27th, 2023, 17-year-old Nahel from Paris was shot in the chest by a police officer during a traffic stop in the municipality of Nanterre. The local prosecutor's office announced that the police officer responsible for the murder was charged with manslaughter and remanded in custody. The current crisis had a precedent in 2005 when the government of the then President Jacques Chirac declared a state of emergency after 10 days of rioting over the death of two teenagers fleeing from police. The crisis erupts against the backdrop of 6 months of demonstrations and strikes since January the 19th, triggered by the pension reform that raises the legal retirement age to 64 and increases the length of contribution required to qualify for a full pension to 43 years.
The World Health Organization warned that the world's population lacks access to safe water, sanitation, and hygiene. The World Health Organization, in its report, explained the health risks and conflicts that unhealthy water can bring to the population. It also attributed to the death of 1.4 million people in 2019 to the contamination of the vital liquid. Among the elements caused by this situation, the report stomach problems, respiratory infections, malnutrition, and parasite diseases. According to the director of the Department of Environment, Climate Change and Health of the World Health Organization, Maria Neira, basic services have progressed, but investments in the area are insufficient. Pope Francis met on Friday with imprisoned WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange's wife, Stella. After the audience, Stella Assange stated that the Pope's gesture in receiving her was evidence of the ongoing show of support for her family's struggle and concern over her husband's suffering. She also recalled that Pontiff sent a letter to her husband in March 2021 during a particularly difficult period. Julian Assange has spent 4 years in British Belmarsh prison fighting extradition to the U.S., where he faced up to 175 years sentence on espionage charges for publishing qualified military and diplomatic cables through WikiLeaks.
When Julian received the letter from the Pope back in March 2021, it was a very dark period for him, and it gave him great comfort. And 2 years later, I've been received here, so it's an ongoing show of support for our family's plight. Generally, we've seen an enormous shift politically around the world. We've seen the Australian Prime Minister, who says he has been engaging with the US administration to bring this matter to a close. The United Nations, the Council of Europe, human rights organizations, press freedom organizations that are all in a total consensus that this case is inhumane. What is being done to my husband is inhumane, that he's suffering, that he's been in prison for over 4 years for publishing true information revealing the killing of innocents and criminality and injustice.
In Moldova, the Ministry of Interior reported that 2 people died as a result of a shooting at the airport of Chisinau. Government authorities said that the shooting was caused by a Tajikistani citizen who was banned from entering the country. After the incident, police authorities carried out an operation and managed to find the attacker, who was injured and is currently receiving medical assistance. Meanwhile, the prosecutor's office opened a criminal case under the Article 278 of the country's penal code, stating that this type of situations is considered a terrorist attack. In the United States, students and activists protest outside the Supreme Court on Friday after it killed U.S. President Joe Biden's $400 million plan to cancel or reduce federal student loan debt for millions of U.S. citizens. The 63 decision with conservative justice in the minority said the Biden administration overstepped its authority with the plan, and it leaves borrowers on the hook for payments that are expected to resume in the fall. The forgiveness program will have canceled $10,000 in students' loan debt for those making less than $125,000 on households with less than $250,000 in income. In the United States, on Saturday, in the state of Florida, a new law comes into effect that allows the carrying of a firearm without a state permit. HB 543 was turned by the Republican Governor Ron DeSantis, passed the Senate on March 30, and will make Florida the 26th U.S. state to enhance such legislation. Despite rejection by the social movements and the Democratic Party, Florida's Republican senators defended the law as a public safety issue. Let's take our final break, but before we invite you to visit our YouTube channel at teleSUR English, there you'll be able to watch our interviews, sub-stories, special broadcasts, and more. Hit the subscribe button and activate the notification bell to stay up to date on the world's most recent events. We'll find out your break, don't go away. Welcome back. On Friday, the Syrian army, backed by the Russian Air Forces, bombed Turkey's position in the province of Idlib. The Syrian Defense Ministry reported that the offensive targeted headquarters at military warehouse of the Jabal al-Hara plateau, where thousands of Turkeys were eliminated. The government of Damascus clarified that these bombings were carried out in response to repeated attacks by terrorist organizations against civilian communities. The government of Russia announced that the Islamic Republic of Iran will officially join the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. During the opening meeting of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization Diplomacy Center, the Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov announced on Friday that Iran will join the regional alliance of which China and Russia are also part. The head of Russian diplomacy explained that completed adherence of Tehran will take place during the next meeting of head of states to be held on July the 4th. In these latest international activities, the Iranian government also aspires to formally join the BRICS organization, which included countries with emerging economies such as South Africa, Brazil, China, India, and Russia. Russia Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, during a press conference at the ministry headquarters in Moscow, said that some Western leaders are trying to freeze the conflict in Ukraine to gain time.
The Western leaders are trying to temporarily freeze the conflict to achieve some kind of ceasefire and gain some time to once again resupply Ukraine militarily, to create a new military infrastructure, to give them new lethal long-range armament.
Lavrov also spoke about the agreement on the export of cereals known as the Black Sea Initiative.
In any case, the export of our fertilizers and food continues. We provide operational support, circumventing both geographic and other technological obstacles that the West has imposed. And I looked at our export figures today. This agricultural year, we expect our exports to reach almost 50 million tons.
On Friday, the UN Security Council voted to end a decade-old peacekeeping mission to Mali, whose military junta urged the troops' removal as it allies with Russia. The vote comes 2 weeks after Malian Foreign Minister Abdoulaye Diop stunned the Security Council by calling the UN mission a failure and urging its immediate end. Mali's relations with the United Nations have deteriorated sharply since a 2020 coup brought to power a military regime, which also severs defense cooperation with France, the former colonial power. The junta has aligned itself with Russia and brought in the Russian military contractors. But he said that the U.S. voted for a solution and disagreed with the timeline for withdrawal. Mali's permanent representative to the United Nations, Isa Konfuru, said that although MINUSMA had failed to achieve its objective of restoring peace, the government and people were grateful for the contribution in other areas, particularly in the humanitarian field. At the same time, he reiterated the Malian government commitment to protecting civilians and reject the Security Council continue to consider Mali as a threat to international security.
While acknowledging that MINUSMA has certainly not achieved its fundamental goal of support for the government's efforts to secure the country, the people and the government of Mali, nevertheless, would like to applaud its contribution in other areas, in particular in the humanitarian one, social assistance, and good offices missions of the Special Representative of the Secretary General. First, Furthermore, I would like to reassure you of the full engagement of the government of Mali to continue working tirelessly to fulfill its primary mission of protecting the civilian populations and their property over all our national territory. On this point, the government regrets that the Council continues to consider the situation in Mali as a threat to international peace and security.
We have come to the end of this news brief, but you can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. You can also join us on our socials. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and on Instagram as well. For Telesur English and from the South, I'm Ana Marrero. Thank you for watching.